Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 88, recording on Thursday, June 5th. Got a guest for you today. His name is Bobby Peters. He is a prolific author and studier of NFL film. He has a ton of books. I'm going to link them in the description. He essentially watches every play that some of these teams run throughout a season, charts them all, and then writes about some of the best ones from that he's seen from each week. It is as detailed as you're going to find, as in the weeds as you'll get. But it's the off season. I want to learn a little bit, and I feel like it's worth diving deep into some of this stuff as I think about formulating questions throughout the rest of the summer and into the fall. Talked about the run game in depth, talked about what makes Kevin O'Connell's offense distinct from some of the others. So you guys will enjoy it. I believe it's high level, but Bobby, he's also hosting a podcast right now called Alert the Post. He had Mike LaFleur, the Rams OC, on. So some of the links to all of that will be in the description below. As always, this show is presented by First Resource Bank. That's a member FDIC bank, mind you, in the Minneapolis area. They've got branches all over the place. It's run by Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, and Charlie Anderson, who are phenomenal people, incredibly good golfers, big-time Vikings fans, and they care about the community. So please, you can open an account with them so easily. It's a very personal feel. Their online banking platform is really good, sleek, easy to use. So I have nothing but positive things to say about those guys and First Resource Bank and Christy at the front desk of the Washington location. It's a great group. You will not be disappointed if you end up using them as your banking platform. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, finally getting over a sickness. So you can also comment and roast me for still probably sounding like I'm under the weather. If you've missed it, had a ton of stories at The Athletic, a lot. For an early June week, I've had multiple. Obviously, rest in peace to Jim Marshall, and thinking about his family. But just what a legend. Wrote a little bit about him earlier in the week. And then had some stuff on Jordan Mason, on the cornerback room, on Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, and we'll have more coming for mandatory mini camp next week. So please check that stuff out at theathletic.com. Without further ado, let's hop right into it. Here is our conversation from Thursday with Bobby Peters. All right, Bobby, thanks for taking time off from your much more important job, probably, to talk about some Vikings football. How you doing, man?
Pretty good, Alec. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. I've introed you, obviously, for this podcast, but I want you just to start, please, for my curiosity and for the listeners, explain the process that you take in breaking down offenses for the books that you end up writing. I told Cody Alexander, a mutual friend of probably both of ours, I don't know how you are so prolific in watching the film and dissecting and being able to document and formulate books. It doesn't really make much sense to me. So please explain the process that you take for one of these books with these offenses.
Yeah, so what I do is, during the season, I try to stay, obviously when I've got a bunch planned for the off season, sometimes, depending on the book that I'm writing, sometimes it takes place later. But what I try to do is take it week by week, right? So you cut up the full game file, and then you label each clip individually, right? So then I've got that, and then I use that to populate my, the spreadsheet that provides all those tables that you see in the books for the complete offensive manuals, basically charting, when a concept was called throughout the season, right? So you're watching every single clip, you're labeling it. And as you're going through this, you start to formulate your thoughts on, okay, they're using this concept for this purpose. You're kind of getting ideas for it, right? So you kind of create the outline, or any ideas you might have for certain sections that way too. So it's not all just, you have to sit down and do it at the end type of thing. But yeah, so that's kind of the intro, or the, how it starts. And then once you have the full season cut up, then what I do is I break it down by concept, right? So then I go through and I try to cover all the main concepts, and then even the ones that are lesser used that I think were impactful or important, or ones that I'm just frankly interested in, I try to cover all those too. And I try to shoot for right around 300 pages just because I think that's a good number without getting way too into the weeds with, plays they might have called once or twice, but at the same time, providing enough context for the reader to understand the full season. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun to do. Like if it wasn't fun, I wouldn't do it. So I was kind of doing this before I started like doing the books. I was kind of doing like full season breakdowns. Like I'm a high school football coach too. So like to try to become to try to, be a better coach and try to grow that way. So it's fun. It's second nature. I don't watch a ton of Netflix if that's the answer.
Yeah, well, it would be impossible. I mean, that's like, again, in talking to Cody, I'm like, he literally, this guy's writing multiple, and I know just because, like, in my amateur way throughout a season and covering the Minnesota Vikings, like, I'm watching film post-game and throughout the week, and I know the time, not only the time, but, like, the mental energy it takes to really appreciate what you're watching. So I have immense gratitude for the work you do. Let's just get to Minnesota because the people listen to this, that's what they'll be curious about. But if I'm not mistaken, the 2024 offense was the first time that you really dove into Kevin O'Connell's time in Minnesota to formulate the manual that you did for the Vikings. I before you did, or throughout the season as you were evaluating the Vikings, like what did you expect to see from Minnesota? And where, I guess, from an idea perspective or background perspective, did you think they would draw from in terms of how they construct their offense?
Yeah, so for a couple years now, I've been keeping an eye on them. They, going back, I think it was either last year or the year before where Cousins had them cooking for a little bit. And then obviously the injury kind of derailed them. And then the stuff that Kevin O'Connell was doing with it, I think they had a slew of backups that were coming in and he was still getting production out of them too. That's the year before that I was studying them a little bit, but then that really caught my attention. And I'm like, well, this isn't a great season to do a book on. Maybe the next year will, right? And it turned out the 24 season really was. What did I expect? I would expect it would kind of fall into the Sean McVay bucket of families of concepts, right? 11, 12 personnel built around like mid-zone and duo with some play actions sprinkled in, and then obviously a robust like 5 and 7 step drop pass game. And it definitely fit those criteria. But Kevin O'Connell does enough of his own stuff to make it obviously interesting, and then enough to make it different from what the Rams did. And obviously how he fit it to his personnel is something that was definitely worth studying, and I learned a ton from it.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine when you say that, how he fit to the personnel, like it probably it revolves around Justin Jefferson. And I guess I would imagine for you, like you probably fixated on his usage and how they deployed him, motions and shifts and just route concepts down the field. But I guess, like, I would be curious, you mentioned the spin that Kevin puts on it. Like, what stood out to you initially, early on, in terms of just differences, adaptations from what Sean McVay's system kind of bases in?
There's a few concepts that stood out to me, but one of them is a concept I call the smash return concept. So basically what it is you've got a corner. So from a 2-man stack, like a condensed split, one of the receivers will run, like a corner route, like a 10-yard. He runs up to 10 yards and then breaks basically 45 degrees to the sideline, just to keep it simple. And then the other receiver will run what I call a return route. So he'll sell like he's running like a 3-yard speed out. He'll get to the numbers and then he'll turn back inside and kind of work back underneath into the quarterback's vision. So this is a typical like constraint frontside concept in McVay's system. Well, Kevin O'Connell loves, and Sam Darnold, both of them together last year, loved pushing the ball down the field. And they would take a base concept like this and adapt it to make it, to push the ball further downfield. So what they would do is they would take these stems. All right. So now the defense is kind of recognizing these patterns, in the first few yards of the play, right? Now you've got this receiver like running the corner out. He gets the 10 yards, sticks his foot in the ground, and takes 3 hard steps to the corner. Well, now he's sticking his foot back in the ground and running what I call a cop route, like a corner post. They had a couple of big plays on that. I think one of them to Jefferson against the Jets sticks out in my head against a too high look. So stuff like that. So they take base concepts, tweak it, and maybe add a double move to it. And there's other examples too, but that's one that sticks out to me that they did to push the ball not only to Jefferson down the field, but Addison and other receivers too.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the aspects I've, since I've covered this team at the beginning of 2022 when Kevin got here, it's one of the layers to what they do that I've tried to get at times in writing and through this podcast. in terms of like the detail of stems and angles that these receivers, like I often, the perception of Kevin O'Connell's former quarterback development, and it's totally understandable why, because of the success that all of the quarterbacks who have played in the system have had. But I've often said, like, the detail of the routes and the way the receivers can kind of put their own English on them, like, is a layer of what they do offensively that maybe I don't know. I've had a hard time probably describing or, disseminating to readers in the audience. And I'd imagine you'd agree, like the route detail is probably one of the things that separates it.
Yeah, there's a defined spacing and timing to everything on a pass play, right? So like the receivers, like I talked about, like that return route, right? That receiver needs to work all the way to the numbers to create the spacing and the timing for the quarterback, right? If he runs that return route, but he cuts it short, okay, well now he's breaking in too soon and he's going to run into the Mike backer or a linebacker that the quarterback wasn't expecting when he gets to the top of his drop. If he pushes it too far, well now he's going to potentially the corner might latch onto it too. So there's the details and the landmarks of the routes are critical in any passing system. And they're obviously very sharp in what Kevin O'Connell's doing. And the other thing too is controlled freedom within that, right? You kind of touched on that a little bit. It's something that the Vikings do a very fair amount of, is what I call the choice concept, and what a lot of those guys call the choice concept, which is, from a 2-man stack, one of the receivers will run like that corner route, right? A vertical, like a 10-yard corner. And then the other one will run what I call a choice route. So he's going to pause. He's going to miss a count at the line of scrimmage, pause for a second, and then he's going to release into the jet stream of the other receiver. And at 4 yards, he gets a choice. He can either sit down against a soft zone, or he can break in or break out away from leverage. And, that's providing receivers some controlled freedom within the structure of the play call. And, TJ Hawkinson feasted on that route, specifically. Jefferson a little bit, but it was mostly Hawkinson. And that brings me to another point too, with just the overall thought of the offense. Like when you have a receiver like Justin Jefferson, a lot of coaches they'll make him the first read on every play. They'll make him the primary in every play. Let's try to get him the ball. Kevin O'Connell didn't do that. Number one, because defenses were starting to double team and bracket Jefferson. All right. So if you're doing that and they're doing that, now Sam Darnold has to hold the ball longer to get to these backside receivers. So you're forcing, the pass protection's got to hold up. You got all these other things have to happen. And now you're putting more on your quarterback's plate. He's got to read it out more. So like on the choice concept, he'd put Jefferson on the other side of the field, maybe draw a little extra coverage over there. Now he knows, pre-snap, based on that look, Sam Darnold would know that Hawkinson has a one-on-one. So pre-snap, he knows he's going to Hawkinson on the choice route. So that's another example of, not always making Jefferson the primary to try to still get the ball out on time for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and in that way, to your point, you're eliminating having a process to the backside or just more time behind the offensive line where the quarterback has to think post-snap after already thinking pre-snap, play after play. You mentioned, and you said this, and it's something, I think here locally, like we joke about at times, like, man, Kevin, they will air it out. Like Kevin and Sam last year was like wanting to just rip it down the field nonstop. And we've talked about this a little bit, but I guess part of me wondered, as you were studying it on a weekly basis and then throughout, like, were you almost surprised or what was the reaction to just seeing the willingness to push the ball time and time again, week after week, as much as they did?
It was fun. That's what offenses should try to do. I think, especially, with their run game. The run game was not incredibly robust, right? They did have some concepts that. Yeah. So they had some concepts that were efficient, but in general, it wasn't very robust. So, you can't live exclusively with underneath passing, right? That has to be a piece of what you're doing. So I think, for other, to create their offense, they had to create explosives. And I think, number one, Kevin O'Connell is very good at designing these, right? Him and his coaching staff do a great job. But number two, Sam Darnold has a strong arm, and he wanted to make these throws too. So I think there's multiple elements. And then obviously when you got receivers like Jefferson, Addison, and some of the other slot receivers that they had, right? If Jefferson's getting double coverage, well, if the protection holds up, other guys are one-on-one, 40 yards downfield, then you can scheme those guys with leverage to get them open too. So I think it just fits their personnel, it fits their coaching staff, and it fit their quarterback really well.
Yeah. You mentioned the run game. I asked you expectations of the offense in general, but you said you probably expected some duo and some mid-zone, but what did you see in the run game? How did you think about the run game, evaluating it?
Yeah, it was really a lot of mid zone, outside zone, and duo. So I think most of your readers and listeners probably understand like outside zone and mid zone, right? It's the offensive line's all working in the same direction. The running back's working that way, and the ball could cut a bunch of different ways, right? Just keep it super general.
Yeah.
Duo is a gap scheme, but without any pullers, right? So it basically looks like an inside dive, to keep it as simple as I can, right? We're trying to create as many double teams up front, up to the linebackers as we can. The running back's going to read the strong side A gap, so right next to the center and guard, and kind of work his way out on the play there. And the Vikings, I think part of this is, and I'd be real curious to ask Kevin O'Connell or someone from the coaching staff this, is kind of how the run game ended up the way it was. You could tell the amount of time and detail they put into the pass game, both the 5-step, the 7-step, the play action stuff, all the different stuff, the way they push the ball down the field, even some of their screen stuff too. There's only so much you can focus on as a coaching staff. And, coming from the McVay family too, like McVay doesn't run a ton of run plays. They run mid zone, outside zone, and duo, and they tag it and they run it differently, but most of their play calls kind of fit into those categories. So I think, there's ways defenses have tried to, stop that, right? They've seen that this isn't, the first year of that kind of system. So I think defenses have kind of caught up to that run style a little bit too, to kind of answer that. But I think in general, I'd be really curious if they, just because they spent so much time and focus on the pass game, if they just didn't have the capacity to handle the run game, to bring it up to that level, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And it's something like I've talked about with people behind the scenes, but also like other coaches at times. I've asked before, like, and this is just like amateur from the outside. You're asking like, why is the run game not better? And one of the responses that I've gotten at times is like, you only have so much time, and you only have so many like walkthrough reps, practice reps, and instances to really work. And if you're deep, the deep passing game is your baby, is what you are focused on. In some ways, because your best player is being paid at a level to where it should be focused on. What Justin Jefferson thrives at is, long striding into the deep passing games and making those stems as effective as he does. Then maybe you just don't have enough time to focus on the run game. But it's interesting to hear you say that, because that is one of the questions I think that a lot of people locally have had of, will they spend more time on it, allocate more time on it? Will they evolve to where it is more, gap scheme oriented? Does that make sense with backs and offensive linemen? Like I was curious to hear your thoughts on the run game in general, because it's been a lot of the conversation locally.
Yeah, no, and there's definitely room for improvement. Like, some of the too is like they get so many too high looks, especially on early downs, because defenses are afraid of those shots. They're afraid of the deep dig cuts, the deep bench cuts, or even the shots over the top. So like, those run averages, if you're calling duo against a too high coverage on 1st and 10, you should be getting, especially those looks, you should be getting close to 4 or 5 a carry. So I think there's definitely meat left on that bone for the coaching staff and also the players to kind of make that. Take the offense to the next level. I think for them to take the offense to the next level, that run game's they got to pick that up.
Yeah. The other aspect I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, because it's been kind of a fascination of mine. You talked about the amount of 5 and 7 step drops. It didn't feel like there was a ton of quick game in their kind of Rolodex last year. And part of me would wonder, how frequent is quick game being used throughout the NFL? But then also, one of the questions I'd have is, when you have a guy like Justin Jefferson, who is as much of a long strider as he is, and if he is being bracketed or manned up kind of at the line of scrimmage, does it become more difficult to like run quick game or to orchestrate quick game? So I guess the question would be, like, how frequent are you seeing in your studies, in your evaluation, seeing quick game throughout the NFL? And then what is the challenge of trying to like run those types of concepts when you have a receiver like Justin who thrives best as kind of a long strider, second level, third level winner down the field?
Yeah, I think their usage probably fits in probably close to the average range. It didn't really jump out to me as something that they called like infrequent. Now, the thing that kind of complicates it and makes it interesting, in my opinion, is a lot of these coaches now have been combining quick game with 5-step concepts. So on one side, you'll have like stick or Omaha, right? Like quick outbreaking cuts.
Sure.
As from condensed splits or even from big splits, they'll run what I call the stitch concept, which is like this was often where they would put Jefferson. So if Jefferson had a one-on-one, he'd be running like a 6-yard stop route on the outside. If he was pressed, he'd run a fade. So there's definitely some quick game stuff that they would run on in their two-man world there. But on the backside, they would pair like a 5-step dagger variation, kind of like a mini dagger. So like the number 2, the inside receiver would run like kind of like a high cross. So he would kind of cut across the field, trying to aim for like the opposite numbers at like 20, 22 yards-ish. And then you'd get a dig route, like a mini dig, like a 12-yard dig on outside of it. And then the running back would like run a check down as kind of hook control. So if the defense, would play soft coverage, 2 for 2 on the front side quick game, the ball would be out of Sam Darnold's hands right away. If you'd get like a cover 2 corner or safety over the top, or like, some sort of cover 3 where the defense is pushing coverage to that side, it would turn into Sam Darnold or the quarterback would reset and work that backside combination. So sometimes they would call quick game, but the ball would come out on 5-step timing back the other way. So they're interesting concepts because they force the defense to take away the quick game with either press coverage or with 3 over 2. And then if you take that away with 3 over 2, now you've got that hook defender on the other side isolated in a high-low. So it's a nice way to kind of get the best of both worlds, because a lot of times you call those dagger concepts. Well, if the defense pushes coverage that way, right, you get an extra hook defender over that way, you're kind of SOL. You're shit out of luck because, there's nothing else on the backside that you can really get to because the dagger is the longer developing of the two. So that was one of my favorite baskets of concepts they called. They called a bunch of different variations of those. They paired it with like smash variations too, and a lot of different things.
And then I guess for those, backside concepts to work for you, I mean, you have to hold up, and and then the quarterback has to be able to process in rhythm, probably to be able to make those really, really work. So it's interesting, kind of to hear you walk through that, because I would imagine, and it's incumbent upon me to do this, if I went back and watched the film and just assessed kind of, those types of concepts that they ran, like how often did Sam Darnold have enough timing to be able to progress kind of backside, and how often did he do that effectively in rhythm? It'd be interesting to look at.
No, that's a good question, and a fair amount, and a lot of those. So to me, those were the interesting clips, right? So like when the defense covers up the front side, we work backside. So I actually spent the time to individually diagram those with defensive coverages in the book, oftentimes, just because I found them interesting. So a few times Darnold would hit that cross, a few times he would hit the dig, and I think there might even be 1 or 2 where he's hitting the check down too. So those to me were interesting. So I wanted to talk about those and expand on those. But it did happen relatively often, because you are right. It does take some extra time to get there. You need a quarterback's feet to be aligned with it and the timing to line up for it.
Yeah. One of the things, and you've hosted, and I'm going to mention this in the intro, but you've hosted a pretty awesome podcast, and had Michael LaFleur, the offensive coordinator of the Rams, on recently. And one of the subjects you guys talked about was pure progression reads. And I mean, part of me, this is a very general kind of idea, but I'd be curious to hear, like, what do you think the percentage is right now of NFL passing concepts that are kind of pure progression style, as opposed to, I don't know, like pick a side or other probably concepts that you could run? Like, how frequent do you feel pure progression is?
I think depends on the team, but I think for like the kind of the McVay, Shanahan world and the guys that kind of come from that, I think, anywhere from any given season, anywhere from like 80 to 95% maybe, depending on the game plan, depending on the season. I think, like I talked about with Mike, and he provided some great insight on it too. So just even me personally, like I played quarterback in high school, I played for a year in college, and we didn't really have pure progressions back then. It was really just, okay, we're trying to get this one guy open. This is what we're trying to do. And it's like, as a quarterback, you're in trouble if that guy's covered. Now it's on you to just kind of run around and hope to make something happen. So I would have loved to have more of those back when I played. And we did have maybe 1 or 2 of them. And those, as a quarterback, one that wants to take ownership of what they're doing. And I feel like it's the best way to let them do that, right? It allows them to see the whole field. You can you're in control, right? You're in control. It gives you all 5 receivers as an option within any play. And then for coaches too, and Mike talked about this, and I gave an example in the podcast too. Like, I have no idea what coverage the defense is going to call, right? Especially pre-snap. They even in the high school level, these defensive coordinators are getting better and better at disguising coverages. And you could sit in the coaches' meetings and then in your meetings with your players and spend hours and hours trying to figure out what the defense is doing, but their job is to confuse you with the coverage pre-snap. So pre-progressions kind of puts that onus on the quarterback post-snap. So after the defense kind of declares what they have to do, okay, now I can see if 1, 2, and 3 is open. Because if you're doing kind of like a pick a side read, if you wait till post-snap to make that decision, okay, okay, it's cover 4. Now I have to go here. Well, that receiver is already out of his break, so the timing of the play is messed up, and the defense can react to it. So I think, like Mike talked about in there, right, it's kind of the way with all these coverage disguises and even coverage recognition post-snap. There's so many different ways you can play cover 4, so it reacts differently to different routes and all that stuff too. So I think it's just, it's not the answer all the time, but I think in general, I think building your system around it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think about it all the time because of watching Brian Flores' defense every day. And it's like, they've got 8 guys lined up in the line of scrimmage. What is it going to be? It'll end up being non-traditional Tampa. Is it going to be Palms? You just never have a feel for what it could look like. So to me, it does make sense if you're playing more, if you're playing quarterback and it's more about like windows and feet and eyes and timing of progressions as opposed to really trying to decipher what a defense in this era of the game is able to do. To me, it makes sense. But I think it's interesting to hear you say 80-90%. Like, I don't know. I kind of would have thought you maybe said around like 60, but it makes sense to me. And then I also, you and Mike talked about this, but the interesting aspect for me is like within those pure progression concepts and reads, like what the quarterback is looking for to maybe get off certain reads quicker than others. Like that to me is those intricate layers
yes.
that intrigue me and are probably just an essential aspect of the coaching behind the scenes.
Yes, and that depends on the concept too. Like so sometimes pre-snap you can kind of, and Mike, and this a good way to kind of frame this is Mike talked about alerts, right? So like if you get a look pre-snap, okay, so say you're playing a Brian Flores defense and you've got this mug front, right? Everybody's lined up at the line of scrimmage. You've got kind of the safeties are kind of off, right? If you've got an alert where like a receiver's running like kind of a comeback one-on-one on the backside, on the single receiver side or something, and that corner's not going to get help because the flat defender's tucked inside the box. All right, so your quarterback can make that the primary and the ball be out, even though that route might not be part of the original 1-2-3 progression. So stuff like that is kind of how you kind of build it up and kind of, like you said, expand the capabilities of it.
Having gone through and put together the manual like you did, which, as I've said at the top, the listeners of this show can find in the description, part of me wonders, what would be your curiosity for what the Vikings offense looks like in 2025, 2026? Obviously, different quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, and so how things evolve around him is going to be interesting, at least from my standpoint. But for you, like, as you go through the film this upcoming season and then after the fact, like, what will you be curious about? What will you be looking for? What do you think, will catch your eye?
So first and foremost is what new like designer shot concepts and double moves and all this other stuff that is Kevin O'Connell going to cook up this offseason? Like how is he going to build out those those couple play calls that we mentioned already? Within that choice route, there's a couple double moves and like concepts off of it that also created some big plays down the field too. So how he continues to build that, because I think his inventory of ways to create explosives is probably one of the larger ones that I've studied in a long time. And
Interesting.
I think, and obviously you can continue to run the same stuff. I think it still kind of serves a purpose within their offense. But coaches are always tinkering, trying to find new ways to do stuff. Just number one, obviously you want to win more games, you want to create explosives. But number two, to kind of stay on top of their buddies. Like I'm sure Kevin's talking to Sean McVay and some of those other guys saying, hey, look what I drew up this week. I didn't see anything on your tape. Like some just like coaching trash talk, if you will. So yeah, I think those first and foremost. Number two, how they kind of address the run game. I think, for a few years now, like I've talked to people, that spend a lot more time than I do watching the Vikings, and the run game's been kind of a focus or like a focal point of criticism for a few years now. So like, he's had a few off seasons to try to adjust. Maybe it's just not a huge part of their offense, and as far as like how they want to spend their time on it, how they want to adjust it. So to kind of see what changes there. And then obviously with a new quarterback, okay, like every quarterback reads things differently and sees things differently. So how J.J. McCarthy kind of fits into what they did last year, and then how they kind of tweak, maybe McCarthy hates choice concepts, so maybe they don't call choice concepts, right? But at the same time, how do you replace that within the offense to kind of keep the machine moving?
Yeah. No, I think, all three of those are great. I definitely 100% think that there is an aspect of Kevin of, yes, they want to create explosive shots down the field, but there's a flair and kind of I don't know, like there is a competition among all of those guys to prove that their designs are as elite or more elite than the others. And the run game, I mean, you said it. They have done in so many different ways. They have tried to adapt and change. I mean, from a personnel perspective, really. I mean, they brought in tight end Josh Oliver to be a run blocker. They've swapped at times certain guard spots, but I mean, I think they've gotten to a place now where they overhauled the entirety of the interior offensive line. They've added Jordan Mason at running back, so it is going to be incumbent upon them to take those personnel advancements and improve the run game. And then, yeah, I mean, I remember last year hearing often about Sam Darnold and how much he loved throwing dagger, and four verts. Like, those were the two concepts that you heard internally talking to people of, like, that's just what he loves. So how many different ways can we find, avenues and paths for him to be able to do that stuff? So it's interesting to hear you say that. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it does evolve. But I appreciate the insight. I know the work you put in. So thank you, Bobby, for the time.
Of course.
Awesome. We will talk soon about, as it go as intricate as possible. But appreciate you. For the listeners, you can obviously find Bobby's manual for the Vikings and then seemingly the 90 others that he's done, which requires a level of time that doesn't make any sense. Bobby, appreciate it. Have a good one, man.
Of course, Alec. Thanks.
And that'll do it for episode 88 with Bobby Peters. Appreciate him spending some time on his work break, hopping on the show, talking about some of the intricate details and layers to what Kevin O'Connell's offense has been and might be moving forward. But it's a pretty, to me, at least in my opinion, I feel like it's a very good primer to thinking about what this thing might look like come the fall, and some of the questions that will probably be worth asking for me, both in press conferences, behind the scenes, in terms of how things kind of move forward. But appreciate Bobby hopping on the show. As I said at the top, you can do two things for him. Go buy his offensive manual of the Vikings if you want as nitty gritty as you're going to find, details on what the Vikings do. And then you can listen to the podcast he's hosting right now called Alert the Post, where he had Mike LaFleur, the Rams OC, on earlier this week. Has some more NFL and college guys coming down the pipe. So think you guys will really, really enjoy that. And you can find that anywhere you get your podcasts. I mentioned a couple things at the top. First Resource Bank, obviously, our sponsor of the show. I mentioned a bunch of the stories that I've written recently, Athletic, much more to come, specifically next week at Mandatory Minicamp. And then if you got here watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, helps us out. And if you're listening on iHeart, Apple, Spotify, Podbean, wherever you get podcasts, you can rate, review, and do all of that good stuff. And we really, really appreciate that. Enjoy your weekend. The Twins have had some injury stuff, which feels like, that's like the saying, the sun is shining and the sky is blue. But enjoy the weekend. Hopefully the weather will be phenomenal, and we will talk to you guys very, very soon.